So for example, you have service owners. So you might have an email administrator, or you might have a network administration team or a server administration team. And those individuals or groups then would interact with process owners. So your incident manager may be the service desk manager. A problem manager may have a role also as either the network admin group manager. A change manager may be another IT manager who is responsible for overseeing the work of the change advisory board. But understand that there is intersection, meaning that the email administrator will need to support service desk and incident management. The email administrator would need to provide support for problem management, so when you start talking about root cause analysis, or change management if there needs to be a change to an email server or a server that is going to be impacted by a change to one of the email servers. So lots of interaction there, and really a need for good communication between and among the members of the IT organization. So that's usually the second point that I want people to get out of any teaching I do about ITIL. The first one is the shared terminology, and the second one is the need for good communication. So we often develop this RACI matrix in order to show and illustrate how communication occurs between and among the various groups. So this RACI matrix, RACI here stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. The rule here is that only one person ultimately is accountable. So we can see in this example, so if we are providing access to the customer database, it may be the IT service manager who is accountable for this particular activity. The IT team might be responsible, meaning they are the ones doing the actual work. They may need to consult the security manager, and they may also need to inform the HR manager. The reason why the RACI matrix can help with communication is because it illustrates or shows to whom we need to communicate, who do we need to inform, who do we need to consult with for each activity. So you never want to have a situation, for example, where a large change is made, it has a major impact to the organization, and the service desk was never informed. So it can help, hopefully, to avoid those types of situations. With that brief overview of some of the basic concepts, I do want to get into the actual processes associated with the life cycle, and specifically starting with service strategy. Service strategy really gets our focus on the business case. And you'll see this a lot in ITIL terminology or in ITIL writing, where it talks about focusing on the needs of the business or having a particular process that is performed according to the needs of the business. It only makes sense or only shows business value if you are operating according to the needs of the business. It's not just for, when you have governance, for example, it may be because you have some type of restriction based on Sarbanes-Oxley, but that is certainly in the interest of the business to conform to those regulations. You're not doing things just for the sake of it. You're doing it because it provides value. There are a number of processes within service strategy, and these are the ones, they may not be confined to service strategy, meaning you may certainly talk about financial management, for example, when you are in service operation or in the operations side or operations phase of the life cycle, but we introduce these processes in the service strategy phase. Those that I have highlighted here in green were introduced with ITIL v3 2011. So some of the activities in service strategy include, and there's a list of 4 activities that help to tie together these various processes. In service strategy, we want to make sure we understand the market. We understand the patterns of business activity. And that may be something like, for a retail organization, it might be understanding that we need to have a blackout period for changes during the busy Christmas season. Or to give an illustration here, how do we manage demand according to patterns of business activity? So if you live in the Washington, D.C. area, this might be a real-life example for you, in that there are two roads leading to the city. They both look about the same distance, but one of them has a number of traffic lights and has a speed limit of 55 miles per hour. The other, wider road has a speed limit of 65 miles per hour and not as many traffic lights. So in order to manage the demand of those two roads, the state of Virginia has instituted a toll road on the wider, smoother road that has fewer traffic signals. So just in the same way in IT can manage demand based on patterns of business activity. So for example, Monday morning may be a busy time for the service desk. They may not provide support after hours if that's not a requirement of the organization. Or if support is provided, the department that requires after-hours support may need to allocate more of their budget to IT in order to provide that support. The second step here in service strategy is to develop the offering. So once we understand the patterns of business activity, we can start developing the offerings, gathering requirements. I had mentioned utility and warranty previously. That's what contributes to the value of a particular service. We want to be proactive. So as members of the IT organization, it really is important for us to keep up to date with the latest trends in IT, with the latest technologies, because you know that the CEO is going to read about it in some magazine, and you want to have answers when he or she comes asking. All of this leads to then developing the services that IT is going to provide. A service here is defined as a means of delivering value to the organization by facilitating outcomes they want to achieve without expecting them to assume ownership of specific costs and risks. And I wanted to read that out because I think there's a few things that are important here, especially the understanding that they're not going to assume the specific costs and risks of the new service that's being developed. So for example, if they have a new point of sale system that needs to be implemented, there is an expectation that there's already a network infrastructure, that there are certain pieces of equipment that already exist in order to onboard this particular service. So they expect us to be able to standardize some of our offerings so that it's not like putting in a whole new IT department every time they want to roll out a new service. Once we've developed the offerings, we need to be sure we've got the appropriate resources and capabilities. So looking here at an example of a carpenter, that's one of the ways that I like to show the difference between resources and capabilities. The resources here would be the hammer, the nails, the boards, the tool belt, and so on. Even the person doing the work is considered a resource, but being able to hammer in that nail without hitting his thumb would be a capability. In addition to the resources and capabilities, we also need to make sure we're controlling costs, reducing risks, and increasing the potential for the service to provide value to the organization. And we look at costs, that leads us to a discussion of another process, financial management. Financial management, especially when you're studying ITIL, it's somewhat easy to remember if you remember your ABCs. It really starts, though, with B, budgeting. So the organization should be providing a budget. IT should be managing within a budget. They do that by accounting, so they keep, in order to keep track of costs, they provide the appropriate levels of accounting. And then there's this idea here of charging, requiring payment for services. That doesn't always happen with IT. In IT, again, they're often seen as a cost center, so I have seen it done very seldom, but I have seen it done previously where there are IT groups or organizations that charge back, whether it be by the user, I've seen it done by the hour, so that it's almost as if IT were outsourced and the various business units actually have to pay for the services that they're consuming. So IT, it's not just a, ask for it and you get it. You ask for it and then you have to pay and allocate a certain portion of the department's budget to IT in order to acquire those new services. Once we've defined the market, we've developed our offerings, and we've developed our strategic assets, then it's time to prepare for execution. So when we want to hand off our requirements to the service design phase, we need to capture all of the information, and we do that one way we have of keeping track or keeping records of the service and all of the details that we've developed surrounding the service using our service portfolio. The service portfolio has three components: the service pipeline, which is services that are in development or that we're considering. We have a service catalog, which are the services in the live environment. And then finally, retired services. We want to keep records of retired services and the associated details because, for one, we may have legacy customers who are still using those retired services. And secondly, we may want to use it as reference. So making decisions about what we do want to do or perhaps what we don't want to do next time we need to roll out a similar type of service. So this is the point where we hand off our requirements to the second phase of the life cycle, the service design phase. So in the service design phase, we want to be sure that the IT services that we're designing meet the current and future needs of the business. I mentioned that phrase comes up quite often. So in addition to the technical architecture, we want to make sure that all of the processes, the reporting, and related documentation are captured as part of our design. And you can see those listed here as the 5 aspects of service design. So it's not just the technology and architecture piece here in the middle. We also want to be sure that we've got the documentation in the service portfolio. We have a solution, so there might be different methodologies that we use, processes, and finally metrics. So starting with a little bit of a deeper dive into the service portfolio. When we get into the design phase of the life cycle, we really focus here on the service catalog. So we've started in strategy with the pipeline. From the pipeline, once it's determined that a service is going to be developed, then it moves into the service catalog.